81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
25% auto tariffs. Yep, you heard that. Right. A massive 25% tax slapped on vehicles coming from certain countries. And guess who ends up paying the price? That's right, you. So, let's break down the hidden truth behind these tariffs and what it means for your wallet, your car, and even your future driving decisions. Spoiler, it's more than just a bump in the price tag. First, let's unpack exactly what these tariffs are and where they're coming from. The 25% tariff is essentially a tax imposed on foreign-made cars, trucks, and auto parts that are imported into the US. These tariffs were part of trade policies designed to protect American car manufacturers from foreign competition, specifically targeting cars imported from places like Europe, Japan, and South Korea. The idea is simple. The US government is trying to level the playing field by making foreign cars more expensive, thus encouraging people to buy American-made vehicles instead. Sounds great in theory, right? But here's where it gets tricky. The reality is that these tariffs raise the prices of all cars, whether American-made or foreign. Manufacturers might be forced to increase prices to cover the extra costs of importing foreign parts, or in some cases, even raise prices across the board. Now, you might be thinking, hey, isn't this good for American car makers? Well, yes and no. Sure, it could make American cars a bit more competitive, but the unintended consequences are real. For one, this hits car buyers directly in the wallet. If you were eyeing a fancy European sedan or a Japanese SUV, get ready to see the price tag climb, potentially by thousands of dollars. And that's not just for the high-end vehicles. These tariffs trickle down to almost every segment, from economy cars to luxury models. Even if you're driving a car made in the US, there's a high chance it's using foreign parts, like engines, transmissions, or electronics, all of which come from overseas manufacturers. So, this 25% tariff doesn't just impact the foreign cars on the lot, it affects the cost of domestic vehicles too. Those extra fees get passed down to consumers in the form of higher prices. But the consequences aren't just financial. The auto industry itself is feeling the strain. Manufacturers who rely on global supply chains are now facing more uncertainty. Automakers don't build cars in a vacuum. They rely on parts from all over the world. When the cost of those parts rises due to tariffs, the entire production process is impacted. This can lead to production delays, fewer vehicle options on dealership lots, and even job cuts as companies try to streamline operations to cut costs. And it's not just the car makers. Think about the workers who manufacture the parts, the shipping companies, the retailers. Everyone along the supply chain feels the heat. But here's where it gets really interesting. While the tariffs are designed to encourage American car production, the actual outcome might surprise you. Many automakers have opted to simply shift their production overseas. Companies like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Toyota already have massive manufacturing plants in the US, but they also have plants in places like Mexico and Canada. So, instead of bringing jobs back to the US, some companies have been rerouting their production to countries with lower labor costs while still using foreign-made parts. In other words, these tariffs haven't exactly achieved the promised goal of boosting American jobs. They've just made the global car market more complicated and raised prices for everyone. So, what does this all mean for you as a consumer? Well, in the short term, brace yourself for higher prices on new cars. That dream car you've been saving up for? You might have to adjust your budget. Plus, the used car market is likely to feel the heat too. As new car prices rise, more people will be holding onto their existing vehicles longer, which will reduce the availability of used cars. That means higher prices for used cars too. If you're looking to upgrade your ride or buy a car for the first time, your options are going to be more limited and the cost might be steeper than you'd like. The long-term effects are still up in the air, but one thing's for sure, these tariffs have shifted the playing field in ways that are hard to predict. Now, let's talk about the global ripple effect these tariffs can create. The auto industry isn't just about the US economy. Cars are made in a globalized world where parts and labor cross borders with ease. When the US slaps a 25% tariff on imports, it doesn't just hurt consumers. Here, it impacts the entire global auto market. Manufacturers in other countries, like Europe or Japan, have to adjust to these changes too. And you know what happens when that happens? Prices in other countries go up. Manufacturers will likely pass on their increased costs to consumers outside the US as well. This means cars could become more expensive not just in America but around the globe. So when we talk about tariffs, it's not just a US issue, it's a domino effect that reverberates around the world. Countries may retaliate with their own tariffs. And before you know it, we could be in the middle of a full-blown international trade war, with consumers everywhere footing the bill. But here's where the tariffs get even more interesting. It's not just the foreign cars that are impacted. American-made cars can feel the heat too. You see, many of the parts that go into a domestic vehicle are sourced from other countries. That's right, an American car might be assembled in Detroit, but its heart, brain, and guts could have come from places like Japan, South Korea, or Germany. With the tariffs slapping a 25% fee on those parts, manufacturers have to decide, absorb the costs, cut corners, or pass the expense to consumers. Many will opt for the latter, which means the prices of American-made cars are also going up. It's a tough pill to swallow for US buyers who were hoping that buying American meant avoiding the tariff issue. But in this complex, global supply chain world, nothing is as straightforward as it seems. So, what does all this mean for the average consumer? Well, it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, it's harder to get a deal on a car. Whether you're buying new or used, expect to see higher prices. Dealerships might even be dealing with lower inventories as automakers adjust to the new reality of tariff-related production costs. The real losers here are the ones who were planning to buy a car soon but didn't factor in the extra 25%. If you're eyeing a new ride, now might be the time to act before prices rise even further. On the other hand, the market might adjust in time. Car manufacturers, after all, are savvy and will look for ways to maintain their competitiveness. We could see new strategies emerge, such as more domestic manufacturing, or increased use of alternative materials, which could help mitigate some of the cost increases. And let's not forget about the used car market. As new car prices go up, the demand for used cars is likely to spike. People who are planning on purchasing new vehicles may choose to buy pre-owned instead, pushing prices higher in the used car segment. It's simple. Economics, less supply, higher demand. So if you're looking for a used car, get ready to pay more. This could make it harder for first-time buyers or those with limited budgets to get into a vehicle, pushing people to hold onto their old rides longer. That could also lead to a shortage of used cars on the market, leaving fewer options for consumers. So, while you might be avoiding the new car sticker shock, you're still feeling the heat in the form of a more expensive second-hand market. But here's the catch: not all car makers are equally affected. Some companies, particularly those that build vehicles in the US, might not feel the full impact of the tariffs. For example, companies like Ford and General Motors already manufacture many of their vehicles here in America. That means they are less reliant on foreign-made parts and materials than foreign companies like Toyota or BMW. However, even these companies won't escape unscathed. They will still be dealing with higher costs for certain parts that come from abroad. For international companies with major US production facilities, there might be more room to absorb the costs without hiking prices too drastically. The bottom line: if you're looking for a tariff-free vehicle, you may want to consider a US-built car. But even then, it's a bit of a mixed bag. At the end of the day, these auto tariffs are a double-edged sword. While they aim to protect American manufacturers and jobs, the impact on consumers is undeniable. They drive up car prices, distort the market, and could even put some buyers out of the game entirely. The ripple effects are felt across the economy, from car buyers to automakers to the global supply chain. These tariffs aren't a quick fix, they're a long-term adjustment, and everyone is trying to figure out how to adapt. Whether it's through price hikes, reduced options, or reshaped global supply chains, there's no easy answer. So, what does the future hold? More uncertainty. But one thing is clear: you, the consumer, are caught right in the middle. The only thing we can say for sure is that, for now, the 25% auto tariff is reshaping the automotive landscape, and the question is, how much are you willing to pay for it? So, what's the takeaway here? The next time you step onto the lot, you might want to check that price tag again, because those tariffs aren't just a footnote in the fine print. They're real. They're here to stay, and they're affecting every car buyer, whether you like it or not. As consumers, we're the ones who will bear the brunt of these trade policies. The question remains: will we see a change, or will the cost of owning a car simply keep climbing? Only time will tell, but for now, the 25% auto tariffs are shaping the future of the industry and your wallet. And let's talk about the environmental impact for a moment. The US is pushing for a cleaner, greener future, but these tariffs might make that harder to achieve. How? Well, the price hike on electric vehicles, EVs, could make them less accessible to the average American. Many EVs come from foreign manufacturers, and because they're typically priced higher, the 25% tariff might make these green machines out of reach for many consumers. It's counterintuitive to environmental goals. At a time when we should be pushing more people to drive electric, these tariffs could put the brakes on EV adoption in the US. So, what's the solution? Well, it's complicated. The government could look at adjusting tariffs or offering subsidies for car buyers to offset the price hikes, especially for electric vehicles and fuel-efficient models. Car manufacturers could shift their supply chains and manufacturing processes to absorb the costs without passing them directly to consumers, though that's a tough sell in today's economic climate. And let's not forget the global impact. If other countries retaliate with their own tariffs, we might be stuck in a never-ending trade war that impacts more than just cars. At the end of the day, these tariffs have put consumers at a crossroads. Do we support domestic manufacturing at the cost of higher prices, or do we look for ways to build a more balanced, sustainable auto industry without penalizing buyers? So, what's the final takeaway here? The 25% auto tariffs are a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they're intended to protect American workers and manufacturers. On the other hand, they're driving up prices for consumers, complicating the car industry, and potentially putting a hold on our green future. For now, it's a waiting game. Will the government step in with reforms or subsidies? Will automakers find a way to absorb the costs and keep prices reasonable? We can only wait and see. One thing's for sure though, as consumers, we're the ones who will ultimately feel the sting of these tariffs in our wallets.